Hey everyone. Ever picture yourself behind the wheel of like a flying car, straight out of a sci-fi movie?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to dive deep into the iconic spinner from Blade Runner 2049,
Okay.
the one that Agent K flies around in.
Yeah. This is going to be cool because we're going way beyond just the visuals of these futuristic vehicles.
Right.
We're going to really zoom in on the spinner's cockpit, using what we see in the film, and then also some awesome concept art by Territory Studio
Oh, cool.
to kind of uncover these hidden details that tell us so much about the world of 2049.
Yeah.
Its technology, its society, even Agent K's place in it all.
So let's set the scene first.
Right.
We're in Los Angeles 2049.
Right.
Dystopian future replicants, Blade Runners, navigating this world that's both technologically advanced and strangely run down at the same time.
Yeah.
Agent K, our protagonist, drives this trusty, but definitely seen better days, Peugeot Spinner.
And remember, spinner, that's the general term for these flying vehicles in the Blade Runner universe.
Right.
They can drive like a normal car on the streets.
Yeah.
Take off vertically like a helicopter.
Whoa.
Hover in midair, and even fly at crazy speeds.
I mean, that's the dream right there.
Yeah, totally. The technology behind them is like a mix of what we know today, like jet propulsion,
Wow.
and then some seriously futuristic stuff. Maybe even anti-gravity systems.
Anti-gravity. Now that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
We're not going full Back to the Future on this one.
Right.
We're focusing on the control center of K's spinner, the cockpit.
Yeah.
And trust me, things get really interesting when you start to decode the visual language of this film.
One of the first things you'll notice, and it might seem small at first,
Okay.
all the screens in K's spinner have this old school 4.3 aspect ratio. You know
Yeah.
those boxy computer monitors from back in the day?
Like a blast from the past in this super high-tech future.
Exactly. It's a choice by the filmmakers that tells us something about the world of Blade Runner 2049.
Mhm.
Like, technology has progressed in some areas, but maybe regressed in others. There's this sense of decay, like clinging to the past even as they're racing towards the future.
Yeah.
What does that say about their society?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's like they've lost something along the way.
Hmm.
Maybe a sense of progress or optimism.
Maybe.
Okay, well, let's break down these screens one by one,
Okay.
starting with screen one,
Mm-hmm.
which seems to be all about navigation.
Right. Screen one gives us this 3D map, shows us the terrain,
Right.
similar to like the glass cockpit systems they use in modern aircraft.
Uh-huh.
Just way more advanced, of course. And you know what's cool?
What?
We see the words autopilot on this screen,
Okay.
along with these codes 24556 and DR5.
Now, those codes, they're not just random numbers, are they?
Not at all. They're actually a direct link to the original Blade Runner.
Oh, really?
And believe it or not, even the movie Alien.
What? No way.
Yeah. Remember that scene in Blade Runner where Deckard's being hunted by Gaff?
Oh, yeah, Gaff takes off and that other cool spinner.
Exactly. And during that spinner's engine startup,
Mm-hmm.
guess what code pops up on the console? 24556 DR5.
You're kidding me. The same code shows up in Alien.
It's true. When Ripley's escaping the Nostromo, you know, that doomed spaceship?
Yeah.
That same code, 24556 DR5, appears when she's activating the self-destruct sequence.
Okay, so it's definitely more than just a coincidence. But what does it all mean? Is it some kind of secret code in this universe or just a fun Easter egg for fans?
It could be both, right?
Yeah.
But in both films, the code appears when engines are starting up.
Right.
So maybe in the Blade Runner universe, 24556DR is like a universal engine check code signaling that everything's good to go.
Like a digital thumbs up for liftoff. But wait, in K's spinner it says DR5, not DR5.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Could that little difference actually mean something?
Definitely worth thinking about. Maybe it points to a different type of engine system.
Okay.
Or it could be a clue to something else entirely, like a hidden message we haven't cracked yet.
Right.
Blade Runner's full of those little details that make you think.
It is.
Okay.
So that's screen one. So much information packed into what seems like a simple navigation display.
Right.
But let's move on to screen two, which looks way more complicated.
Yeah.
It's all about the engine instruments, right?
Screen 2 is visually striking.
Yeah.
With these 16 bars moving up and down, each leaving a trail, like a visual representation of the engine's activity.
I was going to say, it's kind of mesmerizing to watch in the film.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what all those numbers and labels mean,
Oh.
like PID and TIF percent. It's like they're speaking another language.
It is pretty complex, and honestly, some of it might even be beyond our current understanding of technology.
Really?
Remember, we're talking about a future where anti-gravity propulsion could be real.
Right.
But even with that in mind, we can still get some info from this display.
Okay, I'm all ears. What can you tell us about those engine instruments?
Well, for starters, the layout,
Yeah.
it clearly links the bars to the spinner's 8 engine units labeled A through H.
Okay.
And there's a difference between engine SES and engine alt,
Interesting.
which could suggest different functions or types of engines.
So maybe SEC stands for secondary engines, providing additional thrust.
Yeah.
And ALT controls the altitude, like fine-tuning the spinner's vertical movement.
That's a good theory. And you know what else? That 24556DR code,
Oh, yeah.
it pops up on this engine display too.
Yeah.
Further supports that this code means everything's running as it should.
It's like a reassuring pulse in this unpredictable world. A little digital heartbeat letting K know his spinner's got his back.
And speaking of details, there's another cool one hidden in plain sight.
Okay.
After K's forced landing, when the spinner systems reboot, guess what flashes on the screen? The Peugeot logo.
Oh, wow. Really?
A subtle nod to the real-world brand that inspired the spinner's design.
I love those little touches. It's like a wink from the filmmakers reminding us that even in this fantasy world, there are still connections to our own reality.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered 2 screens and things are already getting pretty deep. You ready to move on to screen 3?
Absolutely. Let's jump into screen 3.
Okay.
Now, this one's interesting because it's like portrait-oriented. Unlike the others,
Yeah, it is.
it's mainly used for communication, specifically those cool hands-free video calls between Kay and his boss, Lieutenant Joshi.
It's such a contrast to the more, rugged, almost retro look of the other screens.
Yeah.
Screen 3 feels modern, polished, almost corporate.
And that difference is intentional, right?
Yeah.
It highlights the contrast between the cutting-edge tech of the Wallace Corporation and the more worn, almost outdated systems the LAPD uses.
Yeah, and it's a good way of showing those power dynamics. you know?
exactly.
Like sleek corporate offices versus the gritty streets that K patrols.
Totally. And remember that detail with Kay's status card.
Oh, yeah.
It's displayed on the screen.
Yeah.
And it changes from active to suspended as the story progresses.
Such a small detail.
Uh-huh.
But it, reflects Kay's shifting position within the LAPD.
Right.
And that whole mystery surrounding his identity.
It's amazing how much storytelling they packed into even the tiniest elements.
It is... Okay, now for the big one, literally screen 4. This thing dominates the cockpit.
Right.
It's mounted on this movable arm and can display, a ton of data.
Yeah, think of screen 4 as the heart of the spinner's information system.
Right.
This is where Kay analyzes data from multiple sources,
Yeah.
trying to piece together that complex puzzle of his investigation.
We see it displaying those detailed profiles, like the one for Sapper Morton.
Yeah.
The replicant K retires at the beginning.
Right.
Then there's that shot where it shows a ground scan under a tree, revealing a hidden object.
Huh?
And later we get that amazing cityscape of Las Vegas.
Yeah. Screen 4 really shows how information is layered in this world.
Yeah.
Kay's sifting through so much data, trying to connect the dots between physical evidence, surveillance footage, personal records.
Right.
It's like a visual representation of the information overload he's always facing.
It really makes you appreciate the challenges of being a Blade Runner in this world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about flying cars and cool gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
It's about navigating this crazy web of information.
Totally.
Okay, so we've got the 4 main screens,
Mm-hmm.
each with a distinct purpose.
Yeah.
But there's more to this cockpit, right?
Right.
What about those small LCD displays above the screens?
Yeah, those are perfect examples of how even the mundane details add to the world building.
Okay.
2 of them are right above screens 1 and 2.
And they're constantly displaying Los Angeles Police
Yeah.
and vehicle reg
Yeah.
S99821.
Which is Kay's spinner ID, I'm guessing, like a license plate for flying cars.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Even in this high-tech future, they still need those bureaucratic systems.
Oh, yeah, totally. Some things never change.
Right. And then there's that third LCD display,
Uh-huh.
but we never see what it shows. It's like this little mystery in the cockpit.
Yeah, makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden there.
It does. And what about those 2 panels with indicator lights?
Oh, yeah,
Kind of like an aircraft warning system.
exactly.
Most are glowing amber, which I'm
Yeah.
guessing means caution,
but
but not like a critical system failure.
Right, like the spinner is a bit old, needs some maintenance,
Right.
but it's still holding up.
It really reinforces that this spinner's seen some action.
For sure.
It's not some pristine showroom model.
No, it's a workhorse. A tool that reflects Kay's job.
Yeah,
Those details just add that extra layer of realism.
they do.
Okay.
Now, for the part I'm most curious about, The control sticks.
Ah.
These are what Kay uses to pilot the spinner.
Right.
They look so sleek and modern.
Yeah.
Almost like those fly-by-wire systems in fighter jets.
Right.
Where the controls are electronic.
Exactly.
But here's the thing that always puzzled me. There are no obvious speed or altitude indicators on the main screens. How does Kay know how fast he's going?
That's a good question. It does seem like vital information for a pilot.
It does.
But you know what?
What?
Territory Studios concept art.
Okay.
It shows this tiny display on the left control stick
Okay.
that could show speed and altitude, so they did think about it.
Right, but there are photos where the right stick has the display instead.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's a bit confusing.
It is. It makes you wonder, how are spinners actually piloted in this world?
Yeah.
Do they just rely on those stick displays? Or is there like a heads-up display we don't see?
Yeah.
It's a mystery. Maybe we need a whole other deep dive to figure that out.
I'm in. But before we go down that rabbit hole,
Okay.
let's talk about the analyzer. That cool gadget on the center console.
Ah, yes, the analyzer.
Yeah.
It's a compact tool that lets Kay analyze materials on the go.
Right. Like when he scans Sapper Morton's eye at the beginning.
Exactly. And it instantly pulls up the replicant's profile on screen 4.
It's like having a portable lab in the spinner.
Right. Amazing how fast he can access information.
It is.
Really highlights the sophisticated tech available to law enforcement in this world. Information is power.
Yeah.
And in Blade Runner 2049, the police have access to a ton of data.
And speaking of tech, we can't forget about that little surveillance drone
Right.
that Kay deploys from the spinner's canopy.
It's like an extension of his senses.
Totally. Allows him to scout ahead, gather info remotely.
The drone's a fantastic addition to the spinner, letting him gather information and send it back to screen 4 in real time.
Remember that scene where the drone is flying over that tree?
Yeah.
And it sends data back to the spinner showing that hidden object buried underneath?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of how these systems work together.
It is.
Seamless integration of technology.
It's both fascinating and a little bit unsettling, right?
Yeah.
Like, on one hand, you have these tools that can help solve crimes and keep people safe.
Yeah.
But then there's that whole issue of surveillance and the potential for abuse.
Exactly. The tech in Blade Runner 2049 isn't just about cool gadgets.
Right.
It forces us to think about the implications of this tech on our own lives.
Yeah.
Like, what would it be like to live in a world where everything you do is tracked and analyzed?
It's a chilling thought.
It
And
is.
it makes you appreciate how the film uses these details to ask bigger questions about our relationship with technology.
For sure. It's not just about the what,
Right.
but also the why and the how.
Exactly.
Sure.
So we've covered a lot here, from tiny codes to advanced surveillance systems. It's incredible how much thought went into designing the spinner's cockpit.
It really is.
But there's one final element we need to talk about,
Okay.
and it might be the most important one of all. We've covered the screens, the engine instruments, even that mysterious third LCD display.
Right?
But what about the thing that connects Kay to all this tech? What about the human element?
You're talking about Kay's experience inside the spinner, right? How he interacts with all these systems, what it feels like to be at the controls of this machine.
Exactly. We've analyzed all the tech, but what about the person using it? What does the spinner tell us about Kay?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what makes Blade Runner 2049 so interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just about the cool technology. It's about what it means to be human in a world full of machines.
So how does Kay's experience in the spinner reflect that? What details stand out?
Well, one thing is the contrast between the spinner's advanced capabilities and Kay's kind of limited control over it. Remember, we never really see him manually piloting the spinner.
That's true.
It's usually on autopilot. Or we see those control sticks, but we don't see him like wrestling with the machine.
Yeah, you're right. It's like the spinner is part of the system, a tool that guides Kay as much as he guides it. Makes you think how much agency he actually has.
Totally. It plays into those themes of like predetermination and fate in the film.
Yeah.
Is Kay really in control of his own destiny? Or is he following a path someone else set for him?
It's like those reminders of his status, his ID number, the LAPD watching his every move.
Right.
He's surrounded by technology.
Yeah.
But it also feels like it's trapping him.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the screens. They give Kay so much information, but they also represent a form of surveillance, a way for the authorities to keep tabs on him. He's constantly being watched, analyzed, categorized.
Almost like the spinner itself is a character.
Yeah.
Like this silent observer, reflecting Kay's own struggles.
Yeah.
It's a symbol of the technology that both empowers and confines him.
That's a great point. And it shows how the filmmakers use visuals to communicate those complex ideas
Yeah.
about identity, freedom, the nature of reality.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the spinner, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away?
The biggest thing is that the technology in Blade Runner 2049 isn't just about the cool stuff.
Right.
It's about how that technology affects the characters, the society, their whole world.
Yeah.
It's a warning about what could happen if technology advances too far without any thought to the consequences.
It's a good reminder that progress isn't always a straight line.
Nope.
And even in a world with flying cars and AI, the most important questions are still about what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And those are the questions that stay with you long after the movie's over.
They do.
They make you think about your own relationship with technology and the future we're building.
So everyone listening, as you go about your day, take a second to think about the technology around you. How does it affect your life? How does it influence your decisions? And how can we use it to create a future that's both advanced and human? That's something worth considering.
I think so too.